The road stretched endlessly into the night, swallowed by darkness and silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the faint hum of the engine the only sound keeping me company. My sister sat beside me, unusually quiet, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror again and again. I could feel her tension pressing against me like an invisible weight. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she leaned closer and said, "Turn the car around." Now. Froze. The urgency in her tone pierced straight through me. This wasn't her usual nervousness or overthinking. This was raw, unshakable fear. My chest tightened as I glanced at her. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, her pupils wide like she had just seen something impossible. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back, but she didn't answer. Instead, her trembling hand grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. "Please trust me. If we keep going, something terrible is going to happen." I wanted to laugh it off, to call her paranoid. But something inside me stirred, a cold instinct I couldn't ignore. My heart raced. The road ahead stretched into emptiness, but the air felt heavy, charged with a warning I couldn't explain. Against every shred of logic, I obeyed her. My hands twisted the wheel, tires screeching as we spun back in the opposite direction. That single choice, listening to her trembling whisper, was what saved our lives. Because minutes later, as we drove away, the night behind us erupted into something I can barely describe. Something that still haunts my dreams. The night had a strange stillness to it, the kind that presses against your skin and makes every small sound feel sharper, louder, and more alive. I was driving with one hand loosely gripping the steering wheel, the other resting lazily against the gear shift, trying to keep myself awake as the dark road stretched endlessly in front of us. The yellow lines blurred past like a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, and the headlights cut through the blackness in narrow beams that only revealed more emptiness. My sister sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her shoulders stiff like she was holding herself against some unseen weight. First, I didn't think much of it. She had always been the cautious one, the type who double-checked locked doors, who hesitated before crossing the street even when the light was green, who woke me at night to ask if I had heard a noise she swore came from the window. I used to laugh it off, tease her for being dramatic, but something in her silence that night wasn't like before. It wasn't the usual nervous energy that made her shift and fidget. It was heavy, deliberate, like she was trying to bury fear under control. The quiet inside the car was unnerving, and I finally broke it by asking if she was okay, but she only nodded, eyes fixed on the side mirror like she was searching for something behind us. I followed her gaze once or twice, but all I saw was the empty road we had left behind, glowing in faint silver from the moonlight. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Still, her face told me otherwise. Her lips were pressed so tightly together they had lost all color. Her hands gripped each other in a way that made her knuckles stand out pale against her skin, and her breathing had become shallow, quick, uneven. I wanted to ask again, but before I could, she leaned slightly toward me and whispered with a voice that trembled and cracked like fragile glass, "Turn the car around. Now." The words froze me, caught between my instinct to laugh and my instinct to listen. There was something in her tone that hit me deeper than reason, deeper than the comfort of logic I usually clung to. My first thought was that she had finally lost it, that maybe her paranoia had gotten the best of her. But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and my heart stumbled. Her eyes weren't just afraid. They were wild, desperate, begging without pride, without hesitation. That wasn't her being cautious. That was her being certain. I swallowed, forcing myself to keep calm, though a ripple of unease ran through my chest. "Why?" I asked, my voice low, though I could feel the tension in my throat. She didn't answer. Instead, her hand shot out and gripped my arm, tight enough that her nails dug into my skin. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely there, breaking at the edges. "Just trust me. Please." Her words carried something more than fear. They carried finality, like she knew that if I didn't listen, I would regret it in ways I couldn't undo. For a few long seconds, the only sound in the car was the hum of the engine and the faint whistle of wind rushing against the windows. I stared at the road ahead, dark and endless, and tried to reason with myself. There was nothing there. Nothing wrong. Just asphalt lines and trees. Yet, even as I thought that, my chest tightened as if my body knew something my mind refused to. My sister's hand was still gripping me, her breath coming fast, and I realized I couldn't shake the feeling that the night itself was waiting for me to make a choice. It wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. Against everything logical, I twisted the steering wheel hard, tires screeching as the car turned back the way we came. My sister gasped, then released her grip slowly, like she had been holding her breath this entire time. I didn't know what I was running from, but my heart pounded with the sense that we had just stepped off the edge of something unseen. For a while, neither of us spoke. I kept glancing at the mirrors, half expecting to see something, anything, following us. She sat slumped against the seat, her chest rising and falling in sharp waves, her eyes still darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. I wanted to demand answers, but a strange instinct told me to wait, to let her find her words when she could breathe again. Minutes passed in silence, and slowly the road began to feel less suffocating, less charged with that unshakable tension. Still, I couldn't stop the images forming in my mind. What might have happened if I hadn't turned? Maybe it would have been nothing, maybe just another stretch of quiet road. But in my gut I knew better. There was something waiting up ahead, something that would have swallowed us whole. I didn't know how I knew, only that my sister had felt it first, and for once I had listened. The night outside still pressed against the car, but the air felt thinner, easier to breathe, like we had escaped something we weren't meant to meet. I glanced at her again. Her face was pale, her eyes still wide, but there was relief in them now, relief mixed with a sorrow I couldn't understand yet. I reached out, touched her arm gently and asked, "What did you see?" She didn't answer, only turned her gaze back to the mirror, whispering so softly I almost didn't hear her. "It doesn't matter. Just know it was real." And in that moment, with the empty road stretching behind us and the unknown waiting somewhere in the dark ahead, I realized that the night had changed forever. It wasn't just a drive anymore. It wasn't just fear. It was a choice between what I could see and what I could not, and trusting her had saved us from something I still couldn't name. But deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The road felt longer than I remembered, every stretch of asphalt pulling us further into a silence that neither of us dared to break. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than before, the faint ache in my knuckles reminding me of the tension twisting inside me. My sister sat with her arms folded across her chest, staring out the window as if the darkness beyond the glass had answers she was too afraid to share. I kept glancing at her, waiting for her to speak, to explain why she had begged me so desperately to turn around, but her lips stayed pressed shut, her jaw stiff with something like guilt. Finally, I cleared my throat and asked, "What did you see?" At first, I thought she would ignore me again, that her silence would hang heavy over us until morning, but then she shifted slightly in her seat, her fingers twitching as if she was deciding whether to tell me a truth or keep it buried. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, shaky, but steady enough that I knew she had been rehearsing these words in her mind for the last several miles. She told me there had been headlights following us earlier, a car too far back to be a normal tale, too close to be coincidence. She said it moved like a shadow, mirroring every small turn of my steering, every slow acceleration and brake, as if it were a reflection rather than another driver. She claimed that when she stared into the rearview mirror, she didn't just see headlights. She saw something darker, a silhouette that leaned forward with impossible stillness, as though it were studying us. I felt my chest tighten as she spoke, but I forced myself to keep calm, to keep the car steady. I wanted to tell her she was imagining it, that fear had twisted an ordinary driver into a monster in her mind, but the way her hands trembled against her lap told me this wasn't imagination. It was memory. She whispered that she felt watched, that the longer she looked into those lights, the more certain she became that if we kept going forward, we wouldn't make it back. That was why she begged me to turn. Her words wrapped around me like smoke, hard to see clearly but impossible to ignore. I kept glancing into the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the same headlights she described, but the road behind us was empty, stretching into nothing but darkness. "There's nothing there," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. She shook her head, her hair falling across her face, and whispered, "That's what makes it worse." I wanted to argue, to demand proof, but a deep unease was already gnawing at my thoughts, reminding me of the way her voice had cracked when she told me to turn around. People don't cry out like that unless they are certain. Still, a part of me clung to logic, to the comfort of dismissing the shadows. To distract us both, I turned on the radio, but the signal was faint, filled with static that rose and fell like whispers bleeding through from another place. My sister's hand shot out and snapped it off, her face pale, her eyes wide. "Don't," she said sharply, almost as if the noise itself was dangerous. The silence that followed pressed heavier against us than the static had. We drove for miles without speaking, the hum of the engine and the crunch of tires against the road the only sounds filling the void. Slowly, though, I noticed something strange. Time felt different. The drive we had taken earlier had flown by, the landmarks and turns familiar, easy to recognize. But now, retracing the same road, everything felt stretched, endless, as if the night itself was bending. I didn't recognize some of the trees, the curve of the hills, even the faint lights of distant farmhouses seemed misplaced, too far apart. I frowned, glancing at the dashboard clock. According to it, only 20 minutes had passed since we turned, but my body swore it had been longer, much longer. When I mentioned this, my sister nodded quietly, as though she had already noticed, as though she had been waiting for me to catch up to a truth she was trying not to say aloud. The first real crack in my composure came when I saw headlights in the mirror. At first it was a tiny speck, far back, harmless. Relief washed over me. I wanted to believe it was just another driver, proof that we weren't alone on this endless stretch of night. But then I noticed the way the lights moved, perfectly smooth, perfectly centered, never swaying, never shifting as a normal car would. My stomach dropped. My sister turned toward me slowly, her face ghost pale, and whispered, "That's it." My hands tightened on the wheel, my throat dry as paper. I pressed the accelerator, the engine groaning as we sped up, but the lights didn't fade. They matched our speed, steady and precise, growing brighter with every second. It was as if the driver knew exactly how hard I was pressing the gas, as if they were connected to us. I swallowed hard, sweat prickling the back of my neck, and forced myself not to look back again. "It's just a car," I muttered under my breath, though the words tasted hollow. My sister shook her head, her voice barely audible. "No, it's not." The pressure of those lights burned into the back of my skull, and I could feel my own heartbeat pounding in my fingertips as I clutched the steering wheel. I thought about pulling over, about letting them pass, but some part of me screamed that stopping would be worse, that whatever followed us wasn't meant to go around. It was meant to catch us. I drove faster, the road a blur, the tires humming dangerously against the asphalt. My sister leaned forward, her hands gripping the dashboard, her breathing sharp, ragged. For the first time in my life, I saw terror strip away her usual control, leaving her raw, fragile, and utterly human. "Don't let it catch us," she whispered, and in that moment, I realized this wasn't just fear. This was survival. The lights grew closer, so close that their glow swallowed the entire back window, blinding and relentless. My chest felt tight, my vision swimming with adrenaline. I pushed the car harder, praying for a turn, a sign, anything to break the suffocating rhythm of that pursuit. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light was gone. I blinked hard, checked the mirror again, and there was nothing. Just empty road stretching endlessly behind us. My sister didn't relax, though. She stayed stiff, her body trembling, her eyes fixed on the black ribbon of road. "It's not gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's waiting." And deep inside, despite every shred of reason I clung to, I knew she was right. The empty road stretched before us, but I no longer felt the comfort of emptiness. Instead, it felt like a trap, a stage prepared for something unseen to happen, and every mile that passed tightened the invisible noose around my chest. My sister hadn't taken her eyes off the mirror since the lights vanished, her body stiff as if bracing for a blow that hadn't yet landed, and though I kept glancing too, all I saw was darkness, wide and endless, the kind of dark that seemed to swallow headlights whole. I tried to tell myself that we had outrun it, that whatever car she swore had been following us was gone now, lost to another stretch of highway. But the silence inside the car was too heavy for comfort, and my own thoughts betrayed me by whispering that things don't just disappear like that. They linger, they wait. The dashboard clock ticked slowly, but the numbers made no sense. When I tried to calculate how long we'd been driving since turning back, my mind stumbled, like it was skipping over minutes, like time itself wasn't keeping its usual steady rhythm. My throat was dry, and the taste of fear sat bitter in my mouth, though I hadn't yet admitted to her that I believed it too, that I had felt something unnatural in the way those lights moved, in the precision of their pursuit. Instead, I forced my voice steady and asked if she was sure about what she had seen, hoping for reassurance, but she turned her head slowly, her face pale and tight, and whispered that she wasn't just sure. She knew it wasn't a car at all. Her words chilled me more than the cold air slipping through the crack in my window. I pressed her to explain, desperate for something tangible, but all she said was that when she looked directly into those headlights, she had the sickening feeling that they weren't shining on us. They were looking at us, watching with intent like eyes. My skin prickled at the thought, the hair on the back of my neck rising, and I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles aching. I tried to laugh, tried to push it away, but the sound caught in my throat and came out broken, unconvincing. She didn't laugh back. The road seemed longer than before, stretching into some endless loop where the same trees, the same curves, repeated themselves, as if we weren't escaping but circling back into the same stretch of danger. My headlights hit a reflective sign on the roadside, and for a split second, the glow against the metal looked like another pair of headlights waiting ahead, and my heart leapt before settling into dread again. I realized then that I was no longer just tired. I was unraveling, slipping into the same fear that gripped her, though I fought to keep it hidden behind steady breathing. She reached for the radio again, her hand trembling, then hesitated, as if even the static was safer left unheard. The silence gnawed at us, broken only by the low hum of the engine, but beneath it, I thought I caught faint sounds, like something scraping against the road far behind us, though every time I looked back there was nothing. I wanted to believe my ears were playing tricks on me, that fatigue was bending perception, but the way my sister's body stiffened each time the faint sound rose told me she heard it too. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the car shuddering with the strain, but the sound didn't fade. It followed, distant yet constant, like a predator pacing behind prey. My sister finally spoke again, her voice hollow, almost detached, and told me she didn't think this thing was chasing us in the way we imagined. She thought it was her, not me, that it wanted. Her confession sent ice through my veins. I turned to look at her, my throat tight, demanding what she meant, but she shook her head quickly, biting her lip hard enough that I feared she might bleed. She wouldn't explain, and that silence, that refusal, made my stomach twist with something far worse than fear. It was the knowledge that she was hiding something she believed too terrible to say aloud. As we drove, the darkness seemed to deepen, not just around us but inside the car itself, the air heavy, pressing in from all sides. My headlights cast long beams ahead, but the edges of the road blurred into black nothingness, and I began to feel like we were no longer moving forward through a real place but sliding deeper into something endless and unfamiliar. My hands cramped against the wheel, and I forced myself to breathe, to focus, but even the air felt wrong, stale, thin, like we were running out of it. My sister whispered that we shouldn't look back anymore, that looking gave it power, but of course the moment she said it, I couldn't stop myself. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and for the briefest second, I swore I saw it again. Not headlights, not even light, but two faint glowing circles low against the road, too steady, too knowing, and my heart lurched violently in my chest. I blinked hard, and they were gone, swallowed by the dark, but the image burned behind my eyelids like fire. My sister's voice cracked as she asked if I saw it too, and though my lips parted to deny it, no words came, because denial no longer felt possible. I wanted to stop the car, to scream, to shake us both awake from whatever nightmare we had fallen into, but something inside warned me that stopping meant surrender, and surrender meant we would never leave that road again. So I kept driving, faster, harder, though the road twisted and blurred beneath me. My sister closed her eyes tightly, whispering fragments of prayers I hadn't heard her say since we were children, each word trembling, breaking, but still steady enough to carry hope. And for the first time that night I felt the weight of something beyond us, something ancient and patient, watching from the darkness. I realized then that the question wasn't if it would come back, but when. And worse than that, it wasn't chasing us anymore. It was waiting for us to realize we could never outrun it. The road had become a prison of repetition, every mile blending into the next until I couldn't tell if we were moving forward or trapped in some looping nightmare designed to break us slowly. And the more I tried to convince myself that it was only fear twisting my senses, the more I realized that logic no longer had a place here. My sister hadn't spoken for several minutes, her hands pressed tightly against her knees, her lips moving soundlessly as though she was still whispering prayers too fragile to release into the air, and I wanted to reach for her to ground both of us, but I couldn't take my hands off the wheel, not when it felt like the car itself was the only thin thread keeping us tethered to the world we knew. The faint glow of the dashboard clock told me it was just past midnight, but time had already betrayed us so many times that the numbers meant nothing. The night felt endless, stretched out into something unnatural, and every second pressed heavier against my chest. Then it came again, the glow in the rearview mirror. This time I didn't doubt it, didn't blink it away as some cruel trick of exhaustion, because the light was too sharp, too steady, burning against the back of my eyes even before I turned to look. My breath caught, and I felt my throat close as I stared into the mirror, because it wasn't just headlights anymore. It was closer, brighter, and there was no car around them, only two white circles floating in the dark like unblinking eyes. My sister gasped sharply beside me, clutching my arm with nails that bit into my skin, and she whispered in a broken voice that it was here. I pressed the accelerator, the engine groaning under the strain, but no matter how fast we went, the lights stayed the same distance, never fading, never growing smaller, just watching, following, feeding off our panic. My sister began to shake her head violently, her voice rising as she told me not to look at it, not to give it attention, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the mirror. The longer I looked, the more I thought I saw a shape forming around the lights, a hulking outline that shimmered like smoke, its edges bending as if it wasn't entirely real but still horribly present. I blinked hard, forced myself to look away, and when I did, the steering wheel jerked suddenly in my hands as if something unseen had tugged at it. The car swerved violently across the lane, tires screaming, and for a second I thought we were going to flip. I wrestled the wheel back under control, heart pounding, breath ragged, and I realized with a sickening certainty that it wasn't just following us anymore. It was touching us. My sister's voice broke into a cry, begging me to stop the car. But my own instincts screamed that stopping meant giving it exactly what it wanted, so I kept driving, knuckles white on the wheel. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but the darkness was thick, pressing in on all sides, and I could feel the air inside the car changing, growing colder, heavier, as though the thing behind us was bleeding its presence into our space. My breath fogged faintly in front of me, and every exhale sounded too loud, too fragile in the suffocating silence. My sister whispered suddenly that she could hear it breathing, and though I wanted to deny it, my ears caught something beneath the hum of the engine. A low, guttural rasp, steady and patient, like something ancient dragging air into lungs that didn't belong in this world. My skin crawled, and the instinct to survive burned through me with such force that I nearly lost control of the car again. I shouted at her to tell me what it wanted, why it was following us, but she only shook her head, tears streaming down her face, and cried that it was her fault. I demanded answers, my voice raw, but she wouldn't speak, wouldn't confess, and the silence between us became more terrifying than the thing outside. The road ahead suddenly split, a junction I didn't remember seeing before, two paths stretching into different directions. Without thinking, I took the right, tires skidding as we veered sharply, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought maybe we had escaped it. The rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness, no lights, no glow, just the empty road we had left behind. Relief rushed through me in a shaky exhale, but my sister sat frozen, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes and whispered, "You shouldn't have turned." Before I could ask why, the car's interior lights flickered once, then twice, though I hadn't touched the switch, and a wave of cold so sharp it felt like knives pressed against my skin swept through the car. I looked back into the mirror instinctively, and this time my heart nearly stopped, because the glowing circles weren't behind us anymore. They were inside, hovering just above the back seat, faint but undeniable, staring directly into mine. My scream caught in my throat, and my sister let out a sound so raw it didn't sound human, curling into herself, her hands over her ears, as though the very presence of it was splitting her apart. I slammed my foot on the gas, desperate, frantic, but the speed didn't matter. The thing was already here. The car filled with a smell then, acrid and metallic, like burning wires mixed with blood, and the rasping breath grew louder, filling the space between every frantic beat of my heart. I didn't dare look again, but I could feel it leaning closer, its weight pressing against the back of my seat, its unseen eyes burning holes through my skull. My sister suddenly screamed my name, not in fear but in warning, and without thinking, I swerved hard just as a shadow darted across the road ahead, something massive and formless that vanished the moment the headlights touched it. The car lurched dangerously, the tires gripping the edge of the asphalt, but I managed to steady it again, sweat pouring down my face, every nerve in my body screaming that we were being toyed with, herded. My sister sobbed into her hands, whispering over and over that it wouldn't let us go, that once it chose you, it never let go. Her words cut through me like ice, and for the first time, I wondered if she had seen it before, if this wasn't the first time it had come for her. I wanted to press her to demand the truth, but the air was growing colder, the breathing louder, and I knew that if I gave it one more second of distraction, we might not survive the next turn. So I kept my eyes locked on the road, my body trembling, every muscle burning with the effort of pretending I still had control, while deep inside I realized the truth. We were no longer running from it. We were driving straight into whatever trap it had been waiting to close. The steering wheel felt like it was burning beneath my hands, not from heat but from the raw pressure of holding on when everything around me screamed that it was useless, that no matter how hard I pressed the accelerator or how desperately I kept my eyes fixed on the road, the thing inside the car had already won. Its presence was everywhere, filling the space behind us with crushing weight, its breathing a steady rasp that grew louder until it felt like it was sinking into my own lungs, pulling each inhale deeper than I wanted, forcing my chest to rise and fall in rhythm with something that was not me. My sister's sobs had quieted into sharp, broken gasps, and when I dared to glance at her, her face was pale, streaked with tears, her lips moving in whispers I couldn't hear over the roar of my pulse, but her eyes told me everything. This was no surprise to her. She knew this thing, maybe not its name, maybe not its full shape, but she knew it had come for her, and all along she had been waiting for this night. My throat tightened with questions I couldn't afford to ask, but the silence between us was its own kind of answer, a confession carved into the tremble of her hands and the despair on her face. The rearview mirror pulsed faintly with light again, and though I fought the urge with every muscle, my eyes betrayed me, sliding upward, and there it was. Not headlights now, not even eyes, but a face, or something that wore the suggestion of a face. It wasn't solid, it wasn't human, but it leaned close enough that I saw hollow sockets burning with pale fire and a mouth stretched too wide, opening soundlessly as though it was feeding on my fear. I tore my gaze away, shouted, cursed, begged the car to go faster, but the road itself was betraying me, stretching endlessly, curves looping back in ways that felt impossible, as if the world was folding in on itself. My sister suddenly grabbed my arm, her nails sharp against my skin, and with a voice raw with terror, she told me to stop fighting, that speeding forward only pulled us deeper, that we had to end it now before it dragged us somewhere we couldn't escape. Her words cut through me like glass. Stop. Every instinct screamed that stopping meant death, surrender, annihilation, but the certainty in her eyes shook me. She whispered that it had chosen her, not me, and that it would never stop until it had what it came for. Her voice broke as she said that if I kept trying to save her, I would only lose myself too, that the thing would take us both, and there would be nothing left for anyone to find. My hands trembled on the wheel, my vision blurred with tears, because how could I choose between my sister and survival? How could I leave her to something I couldn't even understand? But then the car jerked again, a violent pull that nearly ripped the wheel from my grip, and I realized we were no longer choosing. We were already being dragged into its jaws. The road ahead shifted, the darkness thickening into a wall, and I knew in my gut that if I kept driving, we would vanish forever. My sister's hand tightened around mine one last time. Her eyes locked on me with a sorrow that cut deeper than fear, and she whispered, "Trust me, just once more." My chest broke with the weight of it, but I slammed my foot on the brake, the tires screaming against the asphalt as the car skidded, twisted, then lurched to a dead stop in the middle of the black road. Silence crashed around us, deafening, as though the world itself had been holding its breath. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No lights, no breathing, no presence, only the sound of my own ragged gasps. I turned to her, desperate, but her eyes were fixed on the darkness beyond the windshield, wide and glassy, and she whispered a final, trembling prayer before her body went still. The temperature in the car dropped in an instant, my breath turning to frost, and I felt it then, the thing shifting forward, reaching, claiming what it had waited for. I screamed her name, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her, but her eyes never moved back to me. The air grew heavy, pressing down until I thought my ribs would crack, and the faint glow from the rearview mirror swallowed the car in blinding white. Then, as suddenly as it came, it was gone. The road was empty. The air was warm again. My chest heaved as I looked around, shaking, and realized I was alone. My sister's seat was empty, her voice silenced, her presence erased as though she had never been there. Tears blurred my vision as I slammed my fists against the wheel, screaming into the emptiness, but the night gave nothing back. I don't remember how long I sat there, broken and hollow, before finally turning the car back toward home. The road was normal again, the curves familiar, the distance making sense, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I drove with numb hands, the silence inside the car unbearable, and when I finally reached the faint glow of the city lights, I realized the truth that will haunt me until my last breath. I had trusted her, I had done what she asked, and it had saved me. But it had taken her. The thing had chosen, and it had won. And now, every night when I drive, I can't help but glance into the rearview mirror, terrified that I will see those glowing circles again, waiting for the moment it decides that saving me once was never meant to last forever. Sparkles, if this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more spine-tingling tales that will keep you on edge.